All right, so my name is Dr. Jonathan Ellerby, and I'm actually recording this for a very specific group of people that I'm working with right now, and in particular, one person who I feel I've become friends with, who asked me a very direct question. Now, more often than not, because I have a PhD in comparative religion, because I've spent 35 years studying religious, spiritual, and healing traditions around the world, people want to know what other traditions have to say. Great healers, great teachers, great mystics. What do we find different and similar in the world of religion? And because of my particular, I guess you'd say, specialization in health and healing, of course, what does this all mean to living a healthier life, a successful life, a balanced life, and finding peace? But I've always tried to avoid speaking very directly about what I believe, and I try to frame what I do. I'm just checking the time here. I try to frame what I do in terms of, well, almost from a research perspective. So when I share what I believe, I usually speak in terms of science, religious studies, cultural studies, psychology, and so on. But this person asked me, well, what if we just start off by you telling me what you believe? Specifically, what do you believe God is? And then, if that's not clear or satisfactory or resonant, I can go research what other people think. So let me start backwards. If you really want to understand what God is, you have to realize that, as Joseph Campbell said, God is a word that is a mere reference for something that it ultimately defies explanation. And as such, it takes on all kinds of different shapes and forms, not only depending on what people have experienced of this ultimate mystery called God, but also depending on who they are, their culture, their time, their language, their education in that time period, and so on. Furthermore, the use of metaphor to describe something that we can't literally describe because it is by definition more like a feeling or like an energy or like something that transcends ordinary reality, kind of leads us into a bit of a trap, because any metaphor for God often becomes mistaken as synonymous. What does that mean? It means if I say God is like a bird, then it's not very difficult for, two conversations later, God is a bird. Or God is like a human. God is human. God is like love. Or, you get the idea. So whether we talk about God as being like energy, or light, or father, or mother, all these things are, at least from a social science perspective, these are linguistic tools. They are ways to talk about something that really can't be talked about, because by definition, it transcends the ordinary world. It transcends the mind. If the ultimate nature of reality, or this thing called God, is what we actually come from, if it's what precedes all life and experience, then no life or experience could adequately reference it. Okay? So that's our starting point. God is mysterious. Okay, part 2. If you want to study more about God and maybe even get beyond your own experiences of God, I recommend a few particular authors to check out. Karen Armstrong, for sort of a historical study of God. I think that's very helpful. Deepak Chopra actually has a book, How to Know God, and other books with God in the title. I think his work is great, actually. I think he's an extremely intelligent man. I think he's actually deeply spiritual. It doesn't matter how good a businessman he is. He knows what he's talking about. So there's no question studying the work of Deepak Chopra is valuable. And then, as kind of a hybrid of the two, I would say it's wonderful to read The World's Religions by Houston Smith. And Houston Smith, who I was fortunate to meet on a couple of occasions and hear speak, was just a wonderful author, a scholar of world religions, but one who is very passionate about understanding the heart of a tradition, the experience of a tradition, and for that matter, the mysticism of a tradition. Now, this brings us to one last category in terms of if you want to learn about God. So if you want to learn about God, there are really two categories, at least academically speaking, that you're going to look towards. One is the religious understanding of God. Okay, so what do cultures and religious traditions call this thing? And then the other is the mystical understanding of God. Now, the mystical understanding of God is about the direct experience. So when we say mystics, mystic doesn't mean mystery. It doesn't mean woo-woo. It doesn't mean, all the other weird things. People have come to use the word mystic. It doesn't mean psychedelic. A mystic, classically speaking, is someone who has directly experienced the ultimate nature of reality, the direct experience of God at such a level or at such frequency that it has permeated their consciousness, their worldview, their paradigm. And clearly, a mystic and their description of God and a religion and its description of God are not necessarily the same. In fact, mystics within religions are often kicked out because very often religions are concerned with social structure, hierarchy, politics, economics, and control. Now, that's not always true, but there's a lot of that in history, and I think we know it. So religion is often colored by the influence of non-mystics. Mysticism is a totally separate study, and if you're really interested in knowing God or exploring what God is, then some comparative text on mysticism is probably a great idea. Now, my favorite is no longer in print. It was by a man named W.T. Stace, S-T-A-C-E, called The Teachings of the Mystics, a brilliant comparative book, not easy to find anymore. If you're going to look one up, make sure that you feel good about the background of the author, make sure you like the writing style, and make sure that the comparative side of it or the comparative process feels fair and representative. All right, so that's about 5-6 minutes on how to get to know what other people think about God. Now, in just a few minutes, I'm going to try to do a quick summary of my experience. Now, I will say that my experience, which is a direct experience that has come through spontaneous and cultivated encounters in a variety of settings, from nature to religious settings to intentional settings to accidental settings, my experience is one that I would call direct. It's something that I felt, and in the moment of feeling it, it felt like an accurate perception of reality as it is. Now, I'm not saying it is for you. I'm saying that's what it felt like for me. I have no doubt that what I experienced as, quote, the ultimate nature of reality is in fact the ultimate nature of reality. Now, why do I think that? Well, first of all, everybody who thinks they've experienced God thinks that it's the ultimate experience. I'm willing to accept that. But the thing that gives me some comfort that at least I'm in a workable model is that it's corroborated by centuries of mystical teachings and writings, centuries, like literally dating back to the early Rig Vedas and before, the nuances of cave paintings and shamanic traditions that predated literacy. It's also corroborated by psychology. It's also corroborated by science. And when I say science, I mean all of the sciences, from medical science to physics to biology, astronomy. There's a congruence between this picture that I have and all these other systems. Now, again, we could all be wrong, but it works for me. In a nutshell, what I would say is that when I think of God as like an ocean. But this is a little tricky to imagine because this is an ocean that doesn't end. So it kind of goes in every direction. There's actually not even a surface per se. It's just everywhere. But like the real ocean, there's a kind of a surface, which we might call ordinary reality or the material world. And if we're on the surface, we kind of think that's all there is. And we see the surface and our play upon it as though it were the only reality. We see waves on that surface, and we distinguish one from the other, and we think it's a world of diversity. There's different winds, different territories of ocean, different parts of ocean around the, imagined world. So there's some parallel there. And yet, like the ocean, what we see on the surface is really barely the beginning of the story, that there are almost infinite layers of depth within that same ocean, and that things can be going on at one level and not another. There might be a pod of dolphins swimming, half a kilometer below the surface. There might be seagulls on the surface. There might be cold water at 2,000 feet, warm water at 50 feet. So the point is that something that appears to be one thing can also appear to be many things. It can be understood on different levels, and relative to where you are, the whole thing looks different. But here's the thing that gets a little weird and wonderful. Imagine now that you are swimming on that ocean. No boat, just you. But now imagine that you are made from salt water. I know it's kind of a stretch of the imagination, but you're made of the very same thing that the ocean is. Now you have enough integrity, let's say energetically, that you hold this different shape, just the way the waves hold different shapes, although they're all the one same ocean. And we might say there's a big wave and there's a small wave. It's still just the same ocean, different waves. So imagine you're like a wave. You're this being, you, swimming in the ocean, except you're made of the ocean. When you dive down into the ocean, you can still feel like you're you, because you're swimming through the ocean, but are you you? Where do you end? Where do you begin? How do you differentiate ocean from self, self from ocean? So for me, God is much more like a subtle energy than anything else. Now, that subtle energy has a very distinct quality, or you might say very distinct characteristics. Its energy is and can be organized. It has multiple layers of expression and multiple layers of density. Everything from that which you can't see all the way to that which you can see. In fact, energy for me is a simple, easily exchanged word for God, but so is spirit, and so is Tao, and so is life. The idea is that there is something, a great mystery, that we all come from. And that mystery, that energy, that consciousness is still with us. It is the source of things. It is the heart of things. It is the container of things. And thus it is the guiding, organizing design. Therefore, the universe responds to our behaviors, our ideas, our attitudes, our feelings, our emotions. All things are interconnected. All things are interrelated. All things are communicating. And so this being, this energy, this mystery feels very personal, because there's a cause and effect to my actions, as though the universe were, quote, listening. And the universe or the world or life, spirit, is designed in such a way. And when I say designed, I don't mean the way an artist designs something. I mean it has a design, that potentiates wisdom and healing. There's something in the design of the universe, in God, that draws us towards love, towards balance, towards wisdom, and towards this thing we might call evolution, the integration of more and more levels of being with more balance, more love, more wisdom, more communication. And so in this curious way, everything is God. God is everything. And yet, there is a layer of this ultimate existence that is individuated, and in our case has self-awareness, self-consciousness. And so we can make decisions. But much like being on your cell phone or playing a video game, you can never operate outside what's possible on the phone or what's possible in the game, or you get an error message. And this is basically where we come into the question of right living, authenticity, harmony. Is anything possible in this world? Well, not anything, actually. Is it almost like anything's possible because there are more things possible than we could possibly do? Yes. Is everything okay and acceptable inside God? Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that if it can exist, it will, and that makes it neither good nor bad. But rather than thinking of good or bad, think about nature. Think about science. The simple question, is it sustainable? Does an empire built on oppression and conquest last forever? No. Does someone who wins in business or sports but wins by cheating, can they win forever? No. So there can be a place for virtually anything, but not everything is in harmony with the design and the original energy. The original energy is not manipulating things. It's not like a person answering emails or agreeing to do some things and not others. But it has a design. And it is implicitly of a nature that is both material and non-material. And so once again, consciousness, emotion, thought, physicality, all these things occur within spirit, can move or change spirit, and can, so to speak, interact with spirit. And then the way you dress that all up, well, that's your spirituality. That's your religion. And maybe it comes to you in a metaphor. Maybe it comes to you in a being or a shape or a song or a vibration or some kind of psychedelic format. But it's all one thing, expressing itself as only you can know it, as it can only be known to you. And that's the only thing you really need to worry about. What other people see and feel and do is not necessarily entirely right or entirely wrong. The only question is whether it resonates with you, your most authentic self, your highest sense of good, and a sustainable life of harmony, growth, and healing. So that's probably enough for now, but that's a little bit about that, and I hope it's helpful. And if you have questions, well, check out my 10,000 other videos or pick up some of my books. Right now, Spiritual Experience is completely free as an electronic copy on my website. You don't have to sign up for anything. You're not going to get a follow-up about anything. You just click the link that says send me the book and it opens right up. So check it out. Let me know if you have questions, and hopefully I'll hear from you soon. I am regularly on YouTube, and if you subscribe, I would be ever so happy, and you will get more of things like this in the future. See you later.